Keanu Reeves unexpectedly stepped into the lakeside cafe, setting the stage for an encounter that would leave everyone inside forever changed. What happened next would amaze even the most skeptical minds with its proof of how kindness and humanity can bridge any divide. The cheerful chime of the doorbell cut through the lazy buzz of summer, signaling something extraordinary. All eyes turned to the tall figure standing in the doorway, his presence radiating a quiet strength. Conversations halted, utensils paused midair, and whispers of disbelief filled the room. Dressed humbly but with an aura that commanded attention, Keanu took a moment to survey the diner. His gaze, calm and deliberate, seemed to promise that this was not just another ordinary day, it was the start of something unforgettable. Before we dive into this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, let's get started. The diner's patrons slowly returned to their meals, but an undercurrent of excitement lingered in the air. At a corner booth, Laura, a young black single mother, was preoccupied, trying to calm her 5-year-old daughter, Chloe. The little girl, dressed in a pink unicorn shirt and mismatched sneakers, pouted and squirmed in her seat. "Please, Chloe," Laura whispered, her voice a mix of exhaustion and pleading. "We're in public. Just eat your food." But Chloe, fueled by frustration and the sweltering heat, crossed her arms defiantly. Suddenly, she grabbed her plastic cup of chocolate milk. Her small hands tightened around it as her face scrunched with anger. Before Laura could intervene, the cup flew through the air, its contents arcing dramatically. Time seemed to slow as every eye in the diner followed the cup's trajectory. It landed with a messy splash, right on Keanu Reeves's lap. Gasps filled the room, the cheerful hum of the cafe now replaced by stunned silence. Laura froze, her face draining of color. Chloe, realizing what she had done, stopped squirming and stared wide-eyed at the man she had just drenched in chocolate milk. Keanu looked down at his soaked pants, then back at the tiny culprit. His expression was unreadable. The tension was palpable, the entire diner holding its breath. Laura scrambled to her feet, clutching a handful of napkins. "I am so sorry," she stammered, her words tripping over themselves. Her mortification was clear, but Chloe's innocent mischief had already set the stage for an unforgettable moment. For what felt like an eternity, the diner remained frozen, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Keanu's gaze shifted from his soaked lap to Chloe, whose wide eyes glistened with tears threatening to fall. Then, without warning, a gentle smile crept across his face. "Well," he said, his voice warm and steady, "I guess this is one way to cool off on a hot day." Laughter rippled through the diner, breaking the silence like a burst of fresh air. Chloe blinked, her lips trembling between a sob and a giggle. Laura, still clutching napkins, hesitated before stepping closer. "I don't know how to apologize enough," she stammered, her face a portrait of embarrassment. Keanu waved her off with a kind gesture. "No need," he said, reaching for a napkin. "It's just chocolate milk. Happens to the best of us." His relaxed demeanor dissolved the tension, and even the most skeptical patrons couldn't help but smile. Keanu dabbed at his pants with a napkin, his smile as steady as ever. Chloe, still gripping the edge of the table, peeked up at him nervously, her lips trembling. Finally, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she mumbled, "I'm sorry, mister." Her words, though small, carried the weight of a child's genuine regret. Keanu crouched slightly, bringing himself to her eye level. "Hey," he said gently, "it's just chocolate milk. You know what? I've spilled way worse than this." Laura stepped forward, clutching a handful of napkins, her face a mixture of gratitude and mortification. "I can't believe this happened. I'm so sorry," she began, her voice quivering. "It's been a tough day." Keanu straightened, looking at her with warm sincerity. "You know," he said, his tone calm but purposeful, "you're doing great. Really." His words seemed to catch Laura off guard, but for the first time all afternoon, her shoulders relaxed just a little. As the hum of conversation slowly returned to the diner, Keanu gestured toward his booth. "Why don't you both join me?" he offered, his voice casual yet inviting. Laura hesitated, glancing down at Chloe, who now wore an eager expression. Are you sure? Laura asked, still unsure about imposing. Absolutely, Keanu replied with a grin. Besides, I could use some company while I wait. Reluctantly, Laura slid into the booth across from him, Chloe bouncing excitedly next to her. What are you waiting for? Chloe blurted out, her earlier nervousness forgotten. Keanu chuckled, leaning back slightly. My car's getting fixed at the garage nearby, he explained. Thought I'd stop here for some local color, and I think I found it. His playful tone drew a giggle from Chloe and a shy smile from Laura. For the first time in weeks, Laura felt a sense of ease. The kindness of a stranger had transformed an exhausting day into a moment she would never forget. As the diner hummed softly around them, Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows lightly on the table, giving Chloe his full attention. All right, he said with a playful curiosity. What's got you so upset today? Was it the chocolate milk? Chloe shook her head vehemently, her small curls bouncing. No! It's because I wanted a unicorn, but Mommy got me a cat instead, she explained, crossing her arms with a pout. And cats aren't magical. She paused dramatically before adding. Also, Mommy says I can't have ice cream for lunch. It's so unfair. Keanu nodded solemnly, as though these injustices were grave indeed. Unicorns are pretty special, he agreed, tapping his chin. But I've heard cats can be pretty sneaky, almost like little wizards. Do you think maybe your cat has secret powers? Chloe's eyes widened at the suggestion, her earlier annoyance replaced with wonder. Maybe, she admitted, her fingers drumming thoughtfully on the table. But I still like unicorns more. Laura, sitting beside her, couldn't help but smile. She watched as Keanu gave her daughter his undivided attention, treating her complaints as though they were of the utmost importance. For the first time in weeks, Chloe seemed genuinely happy, her tantrums and frustrations forgotten. Shifting his gaze, Keanu turned to Laura. And you? He asked gently, his tone kind. It looks like you've had a long day, too. Laura hesitated, unused to being asked such a direct question about herself. But the sincerity in his expression encouraged her. It's been a lot lately, she admitted, her voice soft. Being a single mom is no joke. Working long hours, trying to be there for Chloe, sometimes I feel like I'm failing. Keanu's brow furrowed slightly, his voice firm but warm. Hey, he said, meeting her gaze. From where I'm sitting, you're doing an incredible job. Really? Those words struck deeper than Laura expected. She felt her throat tighten, blinking rapidly to fight back the tears welling in her eyes. Thank you, she murmured, her voice barely audible. For a moment, it felt like the noise of the diner faded away, leaving only an island of calm and connection between the three of them. The warmth of Keanu's words lingered, softening the weight Laura had been carrying for so long. As Chloe played with her napkin, distracted by the idea of her cat's wizard powers, Laura felt a rare openness settling in. Keanu's steady gaze invited her to share what she hadn't said aloud in months. My husband left 6 months ago, she began, her voice low but steady. It was sudden, and I didn't see it coming. One day, he just decided he didn't want this life anymore. She glanced at Chloe, her voice softening. It's been hard, trying to keep it all together for her while barely holding on myself. Keanu nodded, his expression clouded with empathy. That's a lot for anyone to carry, he said gently. But from what I see, you've been carrying it with incredible strength. Laura hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. Some days it doesn't feel like strength, she admitted. It feels like survival. And Chloe, she's so young, but I know she senses it. The tantrums, the crying, it's her way of processing what she doesn't understand. Keanu leaned forward, his voice softer now. When I was younger, he began, I lost my best friend, Logan. And years later, my partner, Rachel, and our child. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken pain. It's a kind of loss that never fully leaves you. But what I've learned is, you don't have to carry it perfectly. You just have to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Laura looked up, her eyes meeting his. How did you get through it? She asked quietly. With people, Keanu said simply. People who reminded me that even when life feels broken, there's still love to be found. And right now, Chloe has you. That's her whole world. For a moment, the din of the cafe faded into the background. Between two strangers, a bond was forming, one rooted in shared understanding and the quiet courage it takes to keep going. The somberness of the conversation began to lift as Chloe tugged at her mother's sleeve. Mommy, she whispered, pointing at Keanu. Does he think cats are really wizards? Laura chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair from Chloe's face. Keanu leaned forward, his eyes lighting up with playful energy. You know, he said conspiratorially, there might just be a secret way to find out. But it's not for everyone, it's for explorers. Chloe's eyes widened. Explorers? She repeated, her voice brimming with curiosity. Keanu stood up, extending his hand to her. Want to go on a little adventure with me? He asked, his tone inviting but calm. Chloe looked up at Laura for permission, practically bouncing in her seat. Laura hesitated for a moment, but Keanu's reassuring smile put her at ease. Okay, Laura said, nodding. But stay where I can see you. Hand in hand, Keanu and Chloe made their way to the back of the diner, where a slightly ajar door led to the alley. The warm afternoon sun spilled into the narrow space, illuminating a small path lined with crates and wildflowers peeking through cracks in the pavement. To anyone else, it might have looked ordinary, but to Chloe it was magical. Do you know what this is? Keanu asked, his voice low and dramatic. Chloe shook her head, captivated. This, he said, spreading his arms, is a secret passage. Only the bravest explorers dare to enter. Chloe gasped, clutching his hand tighter. Where does it lead? Ah, Keanu mused, looking around as though discovering it for the first time. That depends. What are you looking for? Magic? Treasure? Or maybe a wizard cat? Chloe burst into giggles, her earlier frustration and fatigue entirely forgotten. For the next few minutes, the alley transformed into a world of adventure. Keanu knelt beside her, listening intently as she made up stories about hidden kingdoms and magical creatures, each tale more elaborate than the last. From her seat in the diner, Laura watched the scene unfold. For the first time in weeks, she saw her daughter carefree and glowing with joy. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the stranger who had turned their difficult day into something unforgettable. As Keanu and Chloe returned, the little girl's face was flushed with excitement. Mommy, Chloe exclaimed, we found a secret path. And maybe my cat really is a wizard. Keanu grinned, his presence as warm and genuine as ever. She's a natural explorer, he said to Laura. You're raising someone pretty special. As the afternoon light softened, Keanu's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it briefly, his expression shifting to one of quiet understanding. Looks like my car is ready, he said, his tone warm but tinged with regret. Chloe's smile faltered, her excitement from their adventure giving way to the realization that he was leaving. Do you have to go? She asked, her voice small. Keanu knelt down to her level, his gaze steady and kind. I do, kiddo, he said gently. But I'll tell you a secret. Chloe leaned in, her curiosity piqued. Every time you go on an adventure, no matter how small, you're carrying a little bit of magic with you. And that magic? It'll always remind you to keep exploring. Chloe nodded solemnly, her eyes shining. Then, to everyone's surprise, she threw her arms around Keanu in a tight hug. Thank you, she whispered. Keanu hugged her back, his expression soft but deeply moved. As he stood, he turned to Laura. You're raising a remarkable little girl, he said. And from what I've seen today, she's got a pretty remarkable mom, too. Laura smiled, her voice trembling. I don't know how to thank you for everything. You already have, Keanu replied, placing a hand over his heart. Take care of each other, okay? With a final wave, Keanu stepped out of the lakeside cafe and into the waiting car. From the window, Chloe pressed her small hand against the glass, watching him until he was out of sight. For Laura and Chloe, the day had started like any other. But thanks to the kindness of a stranger, it had become a memory they would carry forever. A reminder that even in life's hardest moments, magic and connection can be found in the most unexpected places. Inside the lakeside cafe, the quiet hum of conversation returned, though it was clear the room hadn't quite moved on from what had just unfolded. At the counter, the waitress gathered the check for Keanu's untouched meal, but before she could approach, he gently placed a few crisp bills on the table. "This should cover mine, and theirs," he said, nodding toward Laura and Chloe's booth. "And please, make sure to keep something extra for yourself." The waitress's eyes widened. "Thank you," she said softly, still in awe of the unexpected guest. Keanu glanced around the diner one last time, taking in the simple yet meaningful setting. For a moment, he caught Laura's eye across the room. She mouthed the words, "Thank you," one more time, and he responded with a small, knowing smile. As Keanu headed toward the door, a few diners hesitated, clutching their phones and napkins, clearly wondering if they could ask for a photo or an autograph. Keanu, ever gracious, paused briefly to greet them, signing a menu here and shaking a hand there. But his demeanor remained understated, as if reminding everyone that this moment wasn't about his fame, it was about connection. The bell above the door chimed once more as Keanu stepped outside. For Laura and Chloe, he left more than just the money for a meal. He left behind hope, laughter, and a memory of kindness that would outlast the day. Sometimes, the smallest encounters can leave the biggest impacts. And sometimes, a stranger can remind you that even on the hardest days, there's still so much good in the world. As Keanu's car disappeared down the road, the lakeside cafe returned to its quiet routine. But for Laura and Chloe, the day would never feel ordinary again. Sometimes, it only takes a moment of kindness to change everything. What about you? Have you ever experienced a moment like this? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming tales.